Monday morning. My name vanished from the calendar. No explanation, just silence. Like someone had deleted the company's spine without bothering to look. They called me accounting deadweight. I called what I held the $480 million pin that, once pulled, would freeze their money cold. The CFO laughed through his cost optimization slides. I smiled at the hidden clause on page 9 where his own signature bound the bank to freeze credit without mine. I didn't break anything, I just withdrew the permission everything depended on. And as the clock ran down, I sat drinking tea, listening to silence lock an empire shut. My name is Rowan Hale, and until Monday morning, I was the spine nobody noticed holding Helix Ledgerworks together. The email came at 7:23 a.m., buried between a facilities notice about parking validation and a reminder about the Q3 charity drive. Operations strategy meeting moved to conference room A, updated attendee list attached. My name wasn't on it. After 3 years of never missing a Monday ops meeting, I'd been surgically removed from the roster like a tumor someone finally decided to cut out. I walked past conference room A at 9 sharp, coffee in hand, watching through the glass walls as Trevor Linwood, our new CEO, gesticulated at his PowerPoint. 6 months in, and he still spoke in TED Talk cadences, throwing around synergy and blockchain adjacent like confetti at a parade nobody wanted to attend. Martin Cade, our CFO, sat at his right hand, that thin smile of his cutting across his face like a paper cut, the one that meant numbers were about to bleed. The fresh-faced innovation architecture team kids who couldn't tell a compliance requirement from a coffee order laughed at something Trevor said. One of them, barely out of his MBA, actually high-fived another when the slide changed to operational streamlining. Rowan. Kylie from HR materialized beside me. Her voice pitched in that specific frequency of forced casualness that meant something had been decided about my life without my input. Could you swing by my office later, say, 2-ish? I knew that tone. I'd heard it echo through these halls before, always followed by cardboard boxes and parking passes turned in at reception. At lunch, I overheard 2 junior analysts in the break room. "Did you see the new org chart?" one said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Whole compliance architecture layer is gone. Cade called it dead weight we've been carrying." "About time," the other replied, stirring artificial sweetener into his coffee. That Hale woman always made everything take forever with her processes and sign-offs. I stayed silent, documenting everything in my phone. Times, dates, names, 3 years of building the Aegis pipeline, the entire audit evidence system that kept our fintech operations legitimate enough for our banking partners to trust us with their money, and now I was dead weight. The afternoon brought more signs. My badge wouldn't open the executive floor anymore. The weekly compliance review I'd scheduled 6 months ago had been canceled until further notice. Even the shared drive permissions had shifted. I could see my own documentation but couldn't edit anymore. But they'd made one mistake. In their rush to mark me as overhead, to reduce me to a line item on Cade's cost-cutting spreadsheet, they'd forgotten what I actually did. They saw meetings and reports and signatures. They didn't see the load-bearing wall. I opened my laptop and navigated to the Aegis system I'd architected. Every transaction, every audit trail, every piece of evidence that proved to regulators and banks that we weren't just another fintech house of cards, it all flowed through this pipeline. And at the center of it, like a digital signature written in legal concrete, was my role as evidence custodian. The innovation architecture team could laugh all they wanted. Trevor could revolutionize until his voice went hoarse. But Martin Cade had signed the audit agreement himself last year, probably without reading past the executive summary. Clause 12.4 sat there like a sleeping dragon. In the event of custodian discontinuity without proper transition protocols, all evidence chains and management representations shall be suspended pending restoration of authorized custody. I pulled up our credit facility agreement with Granite State Bank. $480 million in revolving credit, the lifeblood that kept our operations fluid while we waited for client payments to clear. Page 47, Section 8, Subsection C. Any limitation or disclaimer of audit opinion shall constitute an immediate event of default. The pieces were all there. Scattered across documents nobody read anymore because they trusted the system to just work. They trusted me to keep it working while they played their games of Thrones in conference room A. My phone buzzed. Another email. All hands tomorrow. Exciting organizational changes. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at downtown Ashford's skyline. Helix Ledgerworks occupied floors 15 through 18 of this glass tower, our logo glowing proud against the city's gray autumn sky. They thought they were optimizing, streamlining, cutting fat from the bone. They had no idea they were about to cut their own throat. The company retreat at Silver Pines Lodge should have been my first warning that week. 40 miles outside Ashford, the conference center sat pristine beside Lake Miranda, all floor-to-ceiling windows and motivational posters about reaching new heights. I wasn't supposed to be there. My name had been quietly removed from the attendee list, but someone forgot to tell the demo team that their presentation would brick without my converter module. The panic call came at 6:45 a.m. Saturday morning. Rowan, the Aegis demo won't load. We're presenting to the board in 2 hours. I could have let them burn. Instead, I drove out with the backup converter. Professional to the end. Maybe I was still hoping someone would notice what I actually did for this company. The Aspen Room's glass walls were supposed to inspire transparency, but they worked both ways. I stood in the adjacent hallway, hardware delivered, watching the senior leadership meeting through those crystal-clear panels. They'd forgotten about acoustic privacy when they'd designed these rooms. Every word carried through the fashionable thin walls like whispers in a cathedral. Martin Cade stood at the presentation screen, laser pointer in hand, walking through his organizational efficiency metrics. Red boxes highlighted departments marked for restructuring. Mine glowed the brightest. "The beautiful thing," Martin said, his voice carrying that particular satisfaction of a man who confused cruelty with cleverness, "is that Hale already did all the heavy lifting. The Aegis system is completely automated now. She basically automated herself out of a job." Trevor Linwood laughed that practiced executive laugh that sounded like money being counted. "So she's just overhead at this point." "Expensive overhead," Martin corrected. "Her salary could fund 2 of those innovation kids, maybe 3. And honestly, she's already done her job. The pipeline's built. We just need someone to occasionally check the dashboards, maybe update a certificate here and there. Any junior tech could handle it." The room erupted in that specific kind of laughter that executives share when they think they've solved a problem by eliminating a person. Someone I couldn't see who actually said, "Finally cutting the dead weight." I stood frozen in that hallway, hands still on the door handle I'd been about to push. 3 years. 3 years of 16-hour days building a compliance system that could pass the strictest audits. 3 years of being the one who actually understood why every semicolon in those contracts mattered. "The best part," Martin continued, pulling up a new slide titled, "Cost Optimization Wins," is she won't even see it coming. HR's already prepped the package. Generous enough that she won't make noise. Cheap enough that I'll look like a hero to the board. My phone recorded everything. The timestamp, the voices, the casual cruelty of being reduced to a line item. But more importantly, my mind cataloged something else, the sheer ignorance of what they were saying. They thought the Aegis system was just automated pipelines and scheduled reports. They had no idea about the legal architecture underneath it, the careful construction of custodial authorities that I'd built into every contract. That night, back in my apartment, I pulled out the physical copies I'd kept of every agreement. Paranoid, maybe, but in fintech, paranoia was just another word for prudent. The Aegis Evidence Management Agreement with Halberd and Fenwick, our external auditors, was a masterpiece of defensive legal writing. I should know I'd written most of it. Clause 12.4 glowed under my desk lamp's yellow light. The designated evidence custodian maintains sole authority over the validation and certification of audit materials. Any change in custodian requires a formal written transition plan approved by both parties. B. Complete knowledge transfer documented and verified. C. Explicit sign-off from the departing custodian confirming successful transition. Absent these requirements, all evidence chains shall be considered broken, requiring full reestablishment before any audit opinion can be issued. Martin's signature sat bold at the bottom, probably signed between meetings without a second thought. I flipped to the appendix, where the real magic lived. Section A12. Custodial Authority Technical Requirements. In plain English, it meant that my authentication keys weren't just passwords, they were legally binding digital signatures, and according to subsection F, which I'd insisted on adding last year, those keys were registered to me personally through Palace Compliance LLC, my single-member LLC that I'd created for consulting work I never ended up doing. The beauty was in the boring details. Martin had approved it because it saved the company money outsourcing the key management liability to a third-party entity. Even if that entity was just me and different paperwork, he'd even congratulated me on finding a way to reduce our insurance costs. I pulled up the Granite State Bank credit agreement on my laptop, cross-referencing the clauses. There it was, buried on page 47, the audit opinion requirements, any qualification, any limitation, any disclaimer, and the entire credit facility would freeze faster than Lake Miranda in January. They thought I was overhead. Dead weight. Already done my job. I smiled. Remembering Martin's words, she basically automated herself out of a job. No. Martin, I'd automated you into a trap. You just didn't know it yet. Tuesday afternoon, 2:00 sharp. Kylie Marsh's office smelled like lavender air freshener and corporate anxiety. She had my termination package spread across her desk like tarot cards predicting a future somebody else had already decided. We want to make this transition as smooth as possible, Kylie said, her smile stretched tight as a wire. The package is very generous. 3 months severance, continued health benefits through year-end, and of course, a glowing recommendation letter. I noticed what was missing immediately. No Trevor Linwood offering fake gratitude for my service. No Martin Cade pretending this was about anything other than his cost-cutting metrics. Just Kylie and her rehearsed compassion. I'll need all my exit documentation, I said calmly, pulling out my phone to take notes. Complete file, every agreement I've signed, every authority granted, every system access record. Kylie blinked. Most people just signed and left. Probably. That's unusual, but I can arrange it. May I ask why? Personal records, I said. I like complete documentation. She pushed the separation agreement across the desk. Standard language, standard clauses, standard attempt to buy silence with money. I read every word, photographed every page, then signed with the same steady hand that had authorized 1,000 audit reports. Your access will be deactivated at 5 p.m. today, Kylie said, already filing the papers. If you need to collect any personal items, already done, I said, but I'll need confirmation that all my administrative authorities have been properly transitioned for liability purposes. Another blink. I'm not sure what you mean. The Aegis system. I'm the registered evidence custodian through my LLC. Palace Compliance. The transfer of those authorities needs to be documented. Kylie's fingers flew over her keyboard. I don't see anything about that in the transition notes. Martin said the team would handle all technical handovers. The team, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. Which team member specifically? Sable Knox. She's been shadowing your role for the past month. Sable Knox, 26 years old, online certification from a 6-week boot camp, hired because she interviewed well and cost half my salary. She'd asked me once what SOC2 compliance meant, thinking it was a type of software. I'll need that in writing, I said. The official transition of evidence custodian duties to Ms. Knox. Kylie typed something, printed it, signed it, an internal memo confirming that as of 5 p.m. today, all evidence custodian responsibilities would transfer to Sable Knox. Perfect. I left the building at 4:30 p.m., cardboard box empty because I'd never kept personal items at work, another paranoid habit that now felt prescient. Security watched me surrender my badge with the practiced boredom of guards who'd seen too many exits to care about one more. At home, I opened my laptop and logged into the Palace compliance portal I'd created but never really used. Time to change that. First, I drafted a formal notice to Halbert and Fenwick, our external auditors, professional, precise, legally bulletproof. Please be advised that effective today at 5 p.m., Helix LedgerWorks has terminated the employment of Rowan Hale without formal transition procedures for evidence custodian authorities, per Clause 12.4 of our Audit Evidence Management Agreement. Palace Compliance LLC hereby notifies you that custodial continuity has been broken without proper sign-off. All previously certified evidence chains should be considered invalid pending re-establishment of proper custody. I scheduled it to send at 5:01 p.m. Next, I logged into the Aegis Administrative Console, technically still active, for another 23 minutes. I navigated to the authentication module, where my personal certificates lived. These weren't company property. They were registered to Palace Compliance under the licensing agreement Martin had signed without reading. A few keystrokes transferred primary control from my Helix account to my Palace account. Completely legal, completely within the terms of service. At 4:58 p.m., I revoked my sub-certification authorities within the audit portal. Not deleted, that would be destruction of records. Just changed the status from active to pending transfer, awaiting custodial sign-off. The system would keep running, processing data, generating reports, but every single piece of evidence, every certification, every management representation letter would now carry a flag, custodian chain broken, awaiting valid transfer. 5 p.m. arrived with a soft chime from my phone. My Helix email account died mid-refresh. My badge would no longer open any door. My direct deposit would process one last time on Friday. But in the Halbert and Fenwick audit portal, in the Granite State Bank compliance system, in every regulatory database that mattered, I was still the only recognized evidence custodian for Helix LedgerWorks, and I had just formally notified all of them that I was no longer in a position to fulfill that role. My phone buzzed, a text from Omar Reeves, the platform engineer who'd left 6 months ago. Saw the org announcement. They actually did it. The idiots. You pulling the pin? I texted back, already pulled. They just don't know it yet. How long until they notice? I looked at my calendar. Board meeting in 8 days. Quarterly covenant certificates due to Granite State Bank in 10. Martin would probably ask for the management representation letter in about 6 days, giving himself buffer time to review it. Soon enough, I replied. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat back to wait. Somewhere across town. Sable Knox was probably updating her LinkedIn profile to say, evidence custodian, without knowing she'd just inherited a title with no authority, responsibility with no power, a role that existed only on paper because the real position had just walked out the door at 4:30 p.m. with an empty cardboard box. The wine tasted expensive. It should, in about a week. It would be the last luxury anyone at Helix could afford. Wednesday morning brought the first tremor. Not an earthquake, just a 92-second delay in the overnight reconciliation report that usually landed in inboxes at 6 a.m. sharp. Nobody panicked. Systems hiccup, code gets buggy. Trevor probably called it technical debt in his morning stand-up, if he even noticed. By Thursday, the tremors had become a pattern. The client onboarding pipeline showed green lights across the board, but new accounts took an extra 3 minutes to provision. Authentication tokens expired 40 seconds off schedule. The audit trail logger threw warnings about pending custodian verification that the innovation architecture team dismissed as legacy error messages. I watched it all from my apartment, logged into the Palace compliance monitoring dashboard that still had read-only access to the system health metrics. Every small failure was exactly what I'd expected. The Aegis pipeline was trying to self-heal, running its automated routines, but hitting a wall every time it needed custodial sign-off, like a heart pumping blood through vessels that were slowly constricting. The Slack channel transcripts leaked to me through a former colleague painted a picture of controlled confusion. Someone had screen capped the hacked client escalations channel and sent it to my personal email. Anyone else seeing weird latency on the reconciliation modules? Token refresh is acting drunk, related. My dashboard says everything's fine, but clients are complaining about delayed confirmations. Trevor says it's technical debt. We're pushing through. Technical debt, their answer to everything they didn't understand. As if complex systems failed because of messy code rather than missing cornerstones. Friday afternoon, Omar sent me another text. Sable just asked the dev channel what custodial authority means. Says she keeps seeing it in error logs but can't find documentation. Of course she couldn't. I'd written that documentation, stored it in the compliance archive that they'd revoked my access to while forgetting it was also the only place those documents existed. Sable was trying to fly a plane while Googling what the instruments meant. By Monday 1 week since my name vanished from that first meeting, the tremors had become visible shakes. The morning compliance report was 6 hours late. When it finally arrived, half the verification fields showed pending manual review. Martin Cade himself appeared in the Hatch platform emergency channel, his messages growing increasingly terse. Why is the Q3 compliance packet incomplete? Need the management rep letter ASAP for board deck. This is unacceptable. Fix it now. I pulled up the board meeting agenda on the investor relations page. Wednesday, 10 a.m. Audit committee meeting at 9, where they'd review the quarterly compliance certificate before the main session. The certificate that required a valid management representation letter, the letter that needed custodial sign-off to be valid. Tuesday brought desperation masked as anger. Sable had posted 17 messages in the support channel, each more frantic than the last. How do I generate a management rep letter? System says I need custodial authorization, but I am the custodian. Please, someone help. I have Martin breathing down my neck. Found the generate button, but it wants something called a continuity confirmation. Urgent, Martin needs this in 1 hour. The responses were a symphony of ignorance. The innovation architecture team suggested restarting services. Someone recommended clearing the cache. One brave soul suggested calling me, only to be shut down immediately. She's gone. We handle our own problems now. That evening, the LinkedIn message from Omar contained pure gold. Martin just offered the entire dev team overtime to unfuck the compliance system by tomorrow morning. Direct quote. He seems stressed. Stressed was an understatement. Martin had just realized the board meeting was tomorrow. The management representation letter was required, and the system wouldn't generate one without valid custodial sign-off. The same sign-off that required either my authorization or a properly documented transition, neither of which existed. I imagined him in his corner office, that paper-cut smile finally faltering as he stared at error messages he didn't understand. The CFO who'd called me overhead. Deadweight. Already done. The man who'd laughed about automating me out of a job while signing the very documents that gave me the power to stop his heart with a keystroke. The coup de grace came at 11:43 p.m. Tuesday night, a text from a number I didn't recognize, probably someone's personal phone. Rowan, this is Sable. I know you don't work here anymore, but I'm desperate. The system won't let me generate the management letter. Martin says if I don't have it by 7 a.m., I'm fired. Please, can you just tell me what I'm doing wrong? I'll pay you consulting fees. Anything. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. Sable was collateral damage, not the target. But explaining would require admitting what was about to happen, and that would ruin the timing. The Wednesday board meeting was in 11 hours. The audit committee meeting in 10. The covenant certificate was due to Granite State Bank in 3 days. And somewhere in Helix's glass tower, Martin Cade was about to learn that when you call someone dead weight, you should make sure they're not the one holding the rope that keeps you from drowning. I set my alarm for 8 a.m., not because I had anywhere to be, but because I wanted to be fully awake when the edifice started collapsing. My phone was already charging, ready to receive what I knew would be a flood of increasingly desperate messages. The tremors were over. Tomorrow, the earthquake would hit. Wednesday morning, 8:15 a.m. I sat at my kitchen table with black coffee and my laptop, watching the disaster unfold through the Palace compliance portal. The Halbert and Fenwick audit system showed my formal notification from last week, time-stamped and acknowledged. Status: awaiting custodian continuity resolution. At 8:30 a.m., I executed the final move. I logged into the audit portal with my Palace credentials and submitted Exception Report 480. Evidence custodian transition failed. Continuity break confirmed. The report detailed, in painful bureaucratic precision, that Helix LedgerWorks had terminated their evidence custodian without executing proper transition protocols as required under Clause 12.4. The system responded instantly. A red banner appeared across the portal. Evidence lock initiated. Scope limitation pending. Every piece of audit evidence, every certification, every sign-off from the past quarter changed status from verified to custodian chain broken, invalid. The beautiful part was the automation. Halbert and Fenwick's system immediately triggered its notification protocol. According to the service agreement, another document Martin had signed without reading any scope limitation would be simultaneously reported to all relevant stakeholders, including Granite State Bank. At 8:41 a.m., my phone buzzed. Omar, texting from inside. Holy shit! The audit portal just went full red. Martin's assistant just ran past my desk crying. 8:45 a.m. Another text. This one from a number I recognized as belonging to James from legal. The bank just called. They're freezing the credit line. What did you do? What did I do? I pulled the pin, exactly as promised. The Granite State Bank. Credit facility. $480 million in revolving credit that Helix used for everything from payroll buffering to acquisition financing had very specific covenants. Section 7.3.2. Borrower shall maintain unqualified audit opinions from recognized firm. Section 7.3.5. Any scope limitation, qualification, or withdrawal of audit opinion constitutes immediate event of default. The bank's system was even more automated than ours. The moment Halbert and Fenwick's scope limitation notice hit their compliance portal, their algorithms kicked in, credit line frozen, pending transactions held, new draws denied. At 9:02 a.m., the audit committee was 2 minutes into their meeting when someone's phone would have started buzzing, then another, then all of them. My phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. This time, I recognized Martin's personal cell. Declined. The third call came from Trevor Linwood himself. His voicemail was a masterpiece of barely controlled panic. Rowan, there seems to be some kind of technical issue with the audit system. Since you built it, we need you to help resolve this. Call me immediately. Technical issue. As if this was a bug to be patched rather than a legal avalanche I'd triggered with perfect precision. At 9:20 a.m., the real panic set in. My phone exploded with messages. Board is losing their minds. Martin just accused you of sabotage. Legal says we're in breach of credit covenant. Stock buyback just got killed mid-transaction. Payroll can't process without the credit line. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to the Halbert and Fenwick client portal's public status page. There it was, beautiful in its bureaucratic brutality. Helix LedgerWorks, audit status, suspended reason scope limitation, evidence custodian, discontinuity, required for resolution, restoration of valid custodial authority per agreement section 12.4, current custodian of Record Palace Compliance, LLC, status continuity broken due to improper transition. At 9:35 a.m., Martin Cade himself called. I answered this one. What do you want? His voice was ice cracking under weight. Nothing, I said. I don't work for you anymore. Remember, I'm overhead. Deadweight. Already done my job. You know what I mean. What do you want to fix this? Fix what the system is working perfectly. It's doing exactly what you signed it to do. Clause 12.4. Martin, you might want to read it. This is extortion. This is contract enforcement. You terminated the evidence custodian without proper transition. The system responded accordingly. Every automated protocol is executing exactly as designed, exactly as you approved. The bank is freezing our credit. Section 7.3.5 of your credit agreement. You signed that too. Silence. Then lower. More dangerous. You planned this. I planned for proper compliance protocols. You planned to fire me without understanding what I did. One of us planned better. The board will sue you into dust. For what? Following the contracts you signed. Executing the protocols you approved. I've done nothing wrong. Martin, I've done nothing at all. That's the problem without proper transition. I can't do my job. And without me doing my job, you can't do yours. At 9:41, I submitted one final document to the audit portal, a formal notice from Palace Compliance, LLC. Available for consultation regarding restoration of custodial continuity. Standard consulting rates apply $2,500 per hour. Minimum 40-hour engagement. Payment in advance. $1 million to turn the lights back on. The exact amount Martin had bragged my elimination would save over 3 years. The phone rang again. Margot Vale, chairman of the board. I let it ring. The fortress they'd built on my work had collapsed the moment they'd pulled me out of the foundation, and as the calls and texts and emails flooded in, I closed my laptop and made another cup of coffee. The clock on my kitchen wall showed 9:45 a.m. The board meeting would be starting in 15 minutes. They'd walk into that room expecting to review routine compliance certificates and instead find their company frozen solid, $480 million locked behind a wall of contracts they'd signed without reading, processes they'd approved without understanding. All because they'd called me Deadweight and thought they could cut me loose. The pin was pulled. The grenade had detonated. Now came the silence of aftermath. The war room at Helix Ledgerworks had been the executive conference space until 10 minutes ago. Now it looked like a FEMA command center after a Category 5 hurricane. Laptops everywhere, coffee cups abandoned mid-sip, and the massive wall monitor showing the Halbert and Fenwick audit portal in all its red-bannered glory. I wasn't there, of course, but Omar was, and he was living texting me the meltdown with the dedication of a war correspondent. Martin just screamed at legal to make it go away. Legal guy actually laughed. Trevor keeps saying this can't be legal. Lawyer keeps showing him Martin's signature. Someone suggested forging your signature. Compliance director went pale. 10:12 a.m. The audit portal's evidence lock had been active for 1 hour and 31 minutes. Every second that passed, the grace window was shrinking. What Martin didn't know, what he'd never bothered to learn, was that the system had built-in fraud detection. Every attempt to bypass proper channels subtracted time from the resolution window. Find her. Martin's voice apparently carried through the glass walls. I don't care what it takes. Get Rowan on the phone now. They'd tried my number 17 times in the last hour. Each time, I'd declined and documented the call. Evidence of their desperation would matter later if they tried to claim I'd been unreachable. 10:23. The innovation architecture team made their first critical mistake. According to Omar's play-by-play, one of them suggested creating a synthetic certification, tech bro speak, for forgery. They tried to inject a fake custodian sign-off directly into the database. The system caught it in microseconds. A new banner appeared on the portal. Security violation detected. Unauthorized certification attempt. Grace period reduced. 60 minutes. Martin just threw a laptop, Omar texted. Actual threw. It's in pieces. The chief legal officer, Patricia something. I'd never bothered learning her last name, had pulled up the original contracts on the main screen. She was reading Clause 12.4 out loud, slowly, like she was explaining gravity to someone who'd just walked off a cliff. The custodian role cannot be transferred without documented handoff. Rowan Hale, through Palace Compliance, LLC, maintains legal authority. Any attempt to circumvent will result in, oh God, permanent evidence invalidation. What does that mean? Trevor asked. It means if we keep trying to hack around this, We could lose 3 years of audit history. We'd have to rebuild from scratch. It would take months. 10:37 a.m. Sable Knox collapsed in the bathroom. Not metaphorically, actually collapsed. The 26-year-old with her online certification had just realized she'd been handed a title that came with personal liability. If the SEC investigated the audit failure, her name was on the documents as the supposed custodian who'd failed to maintain continuity. Paramedics just arrived, Omar updated. Panic attack? Martin didn't even look up from his screen. 10:45 a. The board meeting was in full session one floor up, and someone had clearly delivered the news. Through the corporate grapevine, word filtered down, Margot Vale had asked for Martin's immediate presence. Trevor was to follow. They're calling it the situation, someone posted in the company Slack before it was immediately deleted. Board wants answers. I pulled up the grace period timer on my screen. They had 4 hours and 13 minutes to restore custodial continuity before the audit portal locked permanently for the quarter. That would mean no Q3 certification, no covenant compliance certificate, and no access to that $480 million credit line until Q4 at the earliest. If they survived that long? 11:01 a.m. My phone rang. Patricia from legal, using her personal cell. Ms. Hale, please don't hang up. I'm not calling to threaten or negotiate. I need to understand exactly what's required to resolve this. Finally, someone asking the right question. The system needs valid custodial transition, I said. That requires 3 things: a formal transition plan, documented knowledge transfer, and my sign-off confirming successful handover. How long would that take? With full cooperation, properly 40 hours minimum. The system is complex, and Ms. Knox needs to understand not just the how, but the why. The board is considering their options. Some members are pushing for aggressive measures. You mean lawsuits? Among other things. I laughed. Patricia, I did nothing wrong. I was terminated without cause, followed all exit procedures, and notified all relevant parties of the custodial break as legally required. Every action the system has taken is automated. Following protocols your CFO personally signed, you'd be suing me for your own failure to execute a proper transition. Silence. Then, the consulting rate you posted, $1 million? 40 hours at $2,500 per hour. Standard for emergency compliance consulting. The board will never approve that. Then the board will never get their audit opinion, and without that, Granite State Bank will keep that credit line frozen. How much does Helix burn in daily operations? $2 million. She didn't answer, but I knew the number, $32 million per day, based on their last quarterly report. 11:17 a.m., the portal showed another attempted bypass. This time, they'd tried to restore an old backup, pretending the last week hadn't happened. The system responded by locking them out entirely for 30 minutes and sending automatic notifications to the SEC about potential records tampering. Martin just punched a wall, Omar texted. His hand is bleeding. No one is helping him. The war room had become a prison. They were trapped between their own arrogance and my architecture, between what they'd assumed and what they'd signed, between calling me Deadweight and discovering I was the foundation. The clock on the portal kept counting down. 3 hours and 41 minutes until permanent lock. Martin Cade, the CFO who'd laughed about optimizing me out of existence, was now bleeding on the carpet of a war room, watching his corporate career die in real time. All because he'd never bothered to ask what I actually did. 12:30 p.m. The emergency board meeting was being broadcast to the war room, and I was getting real-time updates from 3 different sources. The main conference room camera showed 12 faces in various stages of corporate grief denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and Margot Vale, who'd apparently reached acceptance. The wall monitor displayed the Halbert and Fenwick portal like a death certificate. Audit opinion. Status withheld reason, scope limitation, evidence custodian discontinuity, administrator of Record Palace Compliance LLC. Time to permanent lock, 02:47:33. Margot Vale's voice came through someone's phone speaker. clear and controlled. Explain to me, in simple terms, how one person walking out the door can freeze $480 million. Martin, his right hand wrapped in makeshift bandages from punching the wall, tried to minimize, "It's a technical glitch in the compliance system." "It's not a glitch," Patricia from legal interrupted. "Ms. Hale was the legal evidence custodian through her LLC. When we terminated her without executing proper transition protocols, we broke the audit chain. Every certification, every piece of evidence we've submitted for Q3 is now invalid." "And this was legal?" Board member Harrison Wade asked. Patricia pulled up the contracts on screen. "Not just legal, it's exactly what we agreed to. Martin signed this agreement last year. Section 12.4 specifically requires custodian continuity. Without it, the auditors can't issue an opinion. Without an opinion, the bank freezes our credit. So pay her the $1 million and fix it," someone suggested. Trevor Linwood finally spoke. "She won't answer our calls." That was a lie. I'd answered Patricia's call. I simply chose not to answer theirs. 12:45 p.m. The Granite State Bank representatives joined the call. I could tell because the room suddenly went quieter. That specific silence of people realizing external witnesses were present. "Helix needs to understand," the bank's chief risk officer said through the speaker, "that this isn't just about the frozen credit line. You're in technical default. If this isn't resolved by close of business today, we'll have to notify the other syndicate banks. That's another $600 million in term loans that could be called immediately. $1.08 billion. That's what my departure was now worth." "We're working on it," Martin said weakly. Working on it how Margot Vale's voice could have frozen vodka. "Ms. Hale has provided her terms. $1 million for 40 hours of transition consulting. Given that we're burning $32 million per day in frozen operations, that seems remarkably reasonable." "It's extortion," Martin spat. "It's consequences," Margot corrected. "You called her Deadweight. You said she'd automated herself out of a job. You never bothered to understand what she actually did. And now we're all paying for your arrogance." 1:07 p.m. An independent audit specialist they'd emergency hired for $50,000 had just finished reviewing the system. His conclusion was brutal in its simplicity. "The architecture is brilliant. Every failsafe has a failsafe. Every bypass triggers additional locks. The only way through is proper custodial transition, which requires the current custodian's cooperation. Without Ms. Hale, you're locked out. With her, it's 40 hours of work minimum." "Can't we just rebuild from scratch?" Trevor asked desperately. "Sure. It'll take 6 months, cost about $15 million, and you'll have no audit opinion until it's complete. Your bank covenants will be in default the entire time." 1:20 p.m. The SEC called. Someone had forwarded them the automatic tampering notifications from the morning's bypass attempts. They were opening a preliminary investigation into potential financial reporting irregularities. The room erupted, board members shouting over each other, fingers pointing, blame flying like shrapnel. Through it all, the portal kept counting down to 2:13:41. 1:35 p.m. Margot Vale's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Enough, Martin. You're terminated. Effective immediately. Trevor, you have 1 hour to convince Ms. Hale to accept our terms, or you follow him out. Patricia, draw up the consulting agreement. $1 million, paid in advance. Wire transfer within the hour." "You can't do this." Martin stood up, his face purple with rage. "I can and I am. Security is already waiting outside. Your decisions created this crisis. Your ego prevented its resolution. You're done here." 1:41 p.m. My phone rang. Margot Vale herself. "Ms. Hale, I'm calling to personally apologize for how you were treated and to formally request your consulting services." "The terms are non-negotiable," I said calmly. "Understood. $1 million, advance payment, 40 hours of transition support. Patricia will send the agreement within 10 minutes. The wire will process immediately upon signature." "And Martin?" "Gone. Trevor's on notice. The board has reconsidered the value of institutional knowledge. I let the silence stretch. In the background, I could hear shouting Martin being escorted out. Probably. There's one more thing, I said. The 40 hours starts when the wire clears. Not before, and I work remotely. I'm not setting foot in that building while Trevor's still there. Agreed. 1:55 p.m. The consulting agreement arrived. Clean, simple, perfect. I signed and returned it. 2:10 p.m. The wire transfer confirmed. $1 million in my account. 2:11 p.m. I logged into the Halbert and Fenwick portal and initiated the custodial transition process. The red banners disappeared, replaced by yellow transition in progress. Continuity restoration initiated. The countdown timer stopped at 01:42:16. 2:15 p.m. I received a notification that Granite State Bank had placed the credit facility in provisional restoration status available for use, but under enhanced monitoring pending full audit clearance. Margot Vale texted me directly. The board owes you a debt, both for fixing this and for revealing how fragile our leadership made us. I didn't respond. They didn't owe me anything. They'd paid me exactly what I'd asked for the same $1 million Martin had bragged about saving by eliminating Deadweight. The difference was, now they knew the weight hadn't been dead. It had been load-bearing. 3:27 p.m. The final domino fell with surprising grace. The emergency board meeting had been in session for 3 hours when Margot Vale called for the vote. The motion was simple. Immediate termination of CEO Trevor Linwood for gross negligence in operational oversight. Unanimous. Trevor didn't fight it, according to my sources. He simply closed his laptop, stood up, and walked out without a word. The man who'd spent 6 months talking about revolutionary efficiency and innovative disruption had nothing to say when his revolution ate itself. 4:15 p.m. My phone buzzed with notifications as the corporate announcement went live. 2 executives terminated, emergency leadership appointed, and a carefully worded statement about restructuring to better value institutional expertise. Corporate speak for, "We fucked up." The 40 hours of transition consulting took exactly 40 hours, not a minute more. I worked remotely, training Sable Knox through screen shares and documentation. To her credit, she tried. She took notes, asked questions, admitted when she didn't understand something. Maybe she'd actually become competent someday. But I didn't build anything new for them, didn't optimize their systems or improve their processes. I gave them exactly what they'd paid for transition of existing custody, nothing more. 5 days later, the audit opinion was restored. The bank covenant certificates were filed. The credit line flowed again. Helix LedgerWorks would survive, though the SEC investigation would drag on for months and cost them another few million in legal fees. A week after that, I received a call from Margot Vale. The board has authorized me to offer you the position of Chief Compliance Officer, significant equity package, full autonomy over your department, and a direct report to me, not the new CEO. No. May I ask why? Because you only value what you've lost. In 2 years, maybe 3. Some new CFO will look at my salary and think, overhead. Some new CEO will talk about efficiency, and we'll dance this dance again. Things will be different. No, they won't. The only thing that's different is now you know the cost of calling someone deadweight. I hung up. 6 weeks later, I incorporated my consulting firm properly. Not Palace Compliance LLC that was just a shell I'd created for freelance work. This was Real Aegis Advisory Group. We specialize in compliance architecture for financial services companies. My first 3 clients were Helix's competitors, all of whom had watched the very public meltdown and decided they needed to audit their own bus factors. Martin Cade was harder to track, but LinkedIn tells stories if you know how to read them. Last I checked, he was pursuing new opportunities and available for consulting engagements. His posts about lean operations and cost optimization get fewer likes these days. Trevor Linwood landed softer. CEOs always do. He joined a startup as an advisor. probably spinning the Helix disaster as a valuable learning experience. His new company's website lists him as a transformation expert. I suppose destroying a company's operations in 6 months is a type of transformation. Sable Knox still works at Helix. She messages me occasionally with questions, always apologetic, always careful. I answer when I feel like it. She's not the enemy, just another casualty of executives who think understanding something is the same as Googling it. And me, I'm sitting in my home office, looking at my consulting pipeline. 3 more financial institutions want compliance audits. A Fortune 500 company needs someone to document their critical dependencies. A startup wants to build their audit architecture right from the beginning. My rate is now $3,000 per hour. They all pay it. Because they've all heard the story of the $480 million audit pin, the story of how one person, dismissed as deadweight, pulled a single legal lever and froze an entire company. The story of what happens when you optimize away the people who hold your corporate spine together. My phone buzzes. Another LinkedIn message from a recruiter. Another company that just realized they need someone who understands the boring details, the tedious compliance work, the mind-numbing audit requirements that keep the lights on. I archive it without reading. Then I make myself another cup of tea, sit back in my chair, and look at the Helix LedgerWorks building from my apartment window. They've recovered. Mostly. Stock price stabilized. Operations resumed. New leadership making new promises about valuing employees. But sometimes, late in the evening when the office lights create patterns against the darkening sky, I can see the conference room where Martin laughed about cutting dead weight, where Trevor plotted his optimizations, where they decided I was overhead. The tea tastes perfect. Expensive, but I can afford it now. After all, I'm not dead weight anymore. I'm the reason they check the weight before they cut. The clock on my wall shows 5:30 p.m. Somewhere in that building, someone is probably updating a spreadsheet, filing a compliance report, making sure all the certifications are valid, someone whose name the executives will never bother to learn, until the day that person leaves. And the whole system freezes. My phone sits silent on the desk, no longer buzzing with desperate calls. The banking app shows 7 figures, each one a reminder that respect can be purchased if it can't be earned. I close my laptop and stand up. The Helix building fades into the evening cityscape, just another tower full of people who think they're essential and others who know they are. The difference now. They've learned that dead weight is only dead if it's actually weight. Sometimes it's the pin holding the grenade. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. What would you have done in Rowan's position? Have you ever been undervalued at work? Let's discuss in the comments.